All right, I believe we are live. I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting. First order of business is to call the meeting to order. There you go. And now I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. However, I've been informed by administration that 6B on our agenda is not going to be happening tonight. So if I could get a motion to remove 6B and move the amended agenda, it'd be appreciated. Mayor Adjournment.
Thank you. I don't get the opportunity to make many motions, so I'm happy to put this one on the floor to adopt the agenda as amended.
Okay, perfect. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Approved. Next item is the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Mayor Adjournment.
Motion to adopt the minutes as presented.
Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Approved. Cruising right along, there are no delegations this evening. However, we do have a fairly full agenda with important business items. And let's move on to the first item, which is 5A, the Envision Cochrane 2050 project. Mark Krasinski is coming to present to us. Take it away, Mark.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and members of Council. Thank you for having us here today to present the results of our third and final phase of engagement for Envision Cochrane 2050. You'll notice from your report package that we included a draft version of Envision Cochrane 2050 with the report. However, the purpose of today's meeting is to do a review of the summary of the third and final phase of engagement. I'm joined by Rachel Dillon, our lead consultant with O2 Planning and Design, who has a presentation for you that she's going to walk us through right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening. So like Mark mentioned, this is the third and final presentation of what we heard after the third phase of engagement. I'll start with just an overview of the amount of touch points that we've had with yourselves as council, as well as a timetable refresh. I'll also quickly go over the overall engagement strategy, then a summary of phase 3, followed by, since this is the last presentation of what we heard and what we did with what we heard, summary at the end. So I know you've seen this graphic several times, but Envision Cochrane is the plan that pulls together all of these different inputs from different work done over the years. And 3 times we have circulated between administration, yourselves, and the public to really inform the direction of the document to ensure it reflects the community's wishes for the future. And then in turn, this plan defines what we want to achieve as a community, and more specific subject area plans will define how to achieve it and provide that level of detail. So we're so close at the end. At the end of October, where we're finalizing the plan, and starting next Monday will be the start of the approval process. So like Mark mentioned, today I'm providing a summary of what we heard and what we did with what we heard, and then next week you'll see me again and I'll provide a more detailed presentation of the plan itself. So this slide summarizes all the different conversations that we've had through the course of the last year through the project, including some startup conversations, the what we heard presentations, and then the 2 different scenario presentations that we work through different policy approaches for the different topics covered by the plan. So looking ahead, after tonight, I will be back, like I mentioned, next week for the first reading, and then the public hearing will be at the end of November or December 2nd if needed. And then we'll move into second reading. After second reading, the plan is circulated to the CMRB for them to review it for a 2-month period, and then third reading follows after that. So now moving into the overall engagement strategy. Like both Mark and I mentioned, it was 3 phases. Phase 1 really focused on vision and values, and that was last September. This is the easiest phase for the public to participate in because we're really asking people's aspirations for the future, any opportunities and challenges faced by the community, and there's not a lot of material for them to wade through or review, so that has the highest numbers in a typical engagement process and was reflected with Cochrane as well. Phase 2, we had some initial priorities and direction for the public to review and provide their input and feedback on. There's a little bit more information to review, but it's still simple and clear for people to provide feedback on. And then the final phase, We often get a little bit of a drop in numbers because they have the whole plan, but we'll provide summaries as well as the direction, and we got feedback from the public as well on that. So in total, we sent a notification through the utility bills to every household in Cochrane to advise them of each phase of engagement. And over 4,300 people accessed the website during the span of the project. And we received 2,100 responses during the process. And this is everything from survey responses to comments on the topic cards, to map comments, to dots on the dotmocracy we had, or interviews that we had with different organizations in the community. So looking at phase 3 specifically, how we spread the word, in addition to the utility bill inserts in the website, we had several social media posts, we had advertisements in Cochrane Eagle, posters throughout the community on coffee shop and bulletin boards, and an outdoor sign on 5th Street. And then for the engagement tactics, we had 3 different survey options for the public available online. Given that the third phase is reviewing all the plan content, we broke it up into different bite-sized topics so people could choose to do 1 or 2 or all 3 surveys. We also followed up with the community organizations that we've engaged with in the past. We installed engagement displays at the library, SLS Center, the station house, and the ranch house to collect feedback for people as they're passing by. We had in-person events. We were at Cochrane Food Fest, the SLS Center, and the Farmers Market. And we had office hours so we could connect with town staff on their different subject areas and discuss policies with them. We met with Cochrane Planning Commission like we had the previous 2 phases. We had a council workshop, and we attended 2 developer liaison meetings. So now into the bulk of the rest of the presentation. So what we heard and what we did with that information. So for phase 1, our conversation topics focused on the pillars that are in the council strategic plan. What we heard from the vision question is people want a controlled growth that values Cochrane's heritage and maintains a walkable town. For the identity question, people really referenced a small town feel, which I'm sure you hear a lot too when you talk to the public. They really value the ability to be active in nature, witness beautiful vistas, and what makes Cochrane unique. For livability, it's all about implementing infrastructure improvements for current residents in advance of growth. Connectivity, really focused on choice, all different travel modes and how people could have choices and how they move around the community and the infrastructure to support it. The economy question was really about supporting local businesses, particularly in the downtown, and creating more commercial spaces. And for open spaces and natural areas, there is a real focus on protecting nature and green spaces through preservation, education, regulations. So what we did with this information, in addition to being reflected in the vision and goals of the plan, we have land use policy to protect the character of historic downtown and support commercial spaces in neighborhoods. There's community design policies that address many of the suggestions and values that the community has, landscaping, vistas, heritage protection. We have several environmental protection policies, a policy about encouraging infrastructure and advanced development. The mobility chapter really focuses on travel choice, transit, walking, cycling, and driving, and the local business support policies reside within the economic vitality section. So just a reminder for phase 2, what we heard. We specifically asked what a small town feel means to people, and we predominantly heard that it's knowing one another and having that neighborly sense and feelings, as well as amenities and necessities close to home. For arts and culture, it was really about prioritizing community and cultural events and venues. Again, economic vitality, no surprise, local businesses, protecting historic downtown. Parks and Rec, prioritizing multi-use gathering spaces and sports and recreation opportunities. Housing was really focused on housing affordability and high-quality, thoughtfully designed, amenity-rich options for neighborhoods. Open spaces and natural areas, prioritizing pathways and trails to go out and experience nature, as well as to connect different communities together into the downtown. Neighborhood centers functioning as the heart of each community with convenient shopping, services, and amenities. Development corridors as gateways to Cochrane and have a more cozy look and feel to them. And then ensuring new downtown offers a variety of retail, housing, and gathering spaces. So what we did with all this information, we have an art and culture policy to explore a multi-use venue. Again, land use policy to protect the historic downtown. Again, economic vitality policies for local businesses. Our parks, recreation, and open space planning policies support a range of gathering and multi-use opportunities throughout the community. We have a section on pathways and trail policies that really stress those connections and creating a connected network. There's also sensitive access to natural areas policy. Housing affordability has its own policy section. Neighborhood centers really prioritize that concentration of amenities, both in terms of commercial use as well as parks and institutional use. Development corridors have design policies, and then the new and historic downtown have mixed use and design policies as well. So phase 3, since it was a more in-depth engagement, this will take me a little longer to go through, and we'll go through it in 2 parts. So the first part of what we heard, we presented the entire suite of goals, vision, and values to the community. And for the goals, again, nothing that's really different from what we heard in the previous phases. Infrastructure, services, the environment, recreation opportunities, local businesses are all reflected in their feedback for the goals. For the vision, most participants agreed with, or somewhat agreed with the draft vision, and with little recommendations to improve some of the wording with greater emphasis on heritage and diversity in natural areas. Values, again, residents agreed with the values that were presented, and they link up with the council strategic plan. Heritage and protecting the landscape as the community grows is very important there. Growth being supported by infrastructure, protecting natural assets, and improving connections was important for the growth policies. And land use, focusing density in communities that can support it and expanding the park system. So what did we do for that? Well, we revised all the vision, goals, and values. We tweaked the wording and reflected that nuance. We also got a community member suggestion for a new tagline for the vision, Cochrane at home in the hills. So we adopted that one. We thought it was very clean and short and really reflect what was wonderful about Cochrane. Again, policy to align infrastructure with growth, an environmental policy or protection section, and ecological connectivity policies. Connectivity policies to link communities to the downtown, as well as regional connectivity for vehicles, walking, cycling, and transit. Park planning policies, and then all the density policies focus on neighborhood centers, development corridors, and the new downtown. And now the second part of what we heard in phase 3. So for Parks and Rec, it was invest to diversify Cochrane's parks, offer washrooms, promote emerging sports and naturalized areas. Housing, introduce density thoughtfully in a range of housing forms. Community design, really focused on supporting all ages and abilities. Arts and culture, again, supporting the local arts community with venues and events. Community safety, ensuring the town's social infrastructure and healthcare facilities are located to meet growing population. Mobility, very much continuous with the previous 2 phases, addressing traffic, enhance transit services locally and regionally, provide sidewalks, pathways. Servicing, develop infrastructure with long-term needs in mind. And then implementation, involving the community in town processes and contributing to truth and reconciliation. And then economic vitality, supporting local businesses. So we have a park investment policy as well as park programming. There's a naturalization policy. Housing choice has its own section in the housing chapter. There are accessibility policies peppered throughout the plan related to design, housing, mobility, parks and recreation. There's an arts and culture venue policy, and then diverse and sustainable funding sources policy, collaboration with the province, with health, social, and educational facilities, local and regional transit policies, pathway connectivity, infrastructure sustainability, community engagement, and Indigenous policies, and a local business policy. And with all that, I'll conclude my presentation, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions or comments.
All right, thanks for your presentation. Councillor Reid?
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation and the opportunity we had to speak earlier with members of the council. I'm just curious in terms of process, are we holding this over till questions till next Monday, or can we just fire away now?
That's a good question for administration. Do we want all questions in discussion now, or how do we want to move forward this evening?
Through the chair, Councillor Reid, I think part of the intent today was to really focus our questions and our presentation on the What We Heard report. However, at first reading next week, we'll have a presentation on the full document and be ready to field some additional questions about that as well.
Okay, so, so just a couple of comments then, and maybe a question or two. So on page 13 of the summary document, which I recognize is not part of this, but it was certainly highlighted in terms of that. I was really pleased to hear about the land use, that participants supported the preservation and enhancement of natural areas. I think that's great. That's just a personal agenda of mine. The oversight section, or the overall insight section under housing, there was a reference to the impact of, a concern about the impact of high-density housing development. And I was wondering, how does that concern relate to the comment under land use, where it refers to that the participants wish to see higher density growth, but in concentrated or constrained areas? How do those two jive? Again, you don't necessarily need to answer that tonight, but I would be curious if, in preparation for Monday night's discussion, if you prepare for that.
Oh, absolutely. So as you can imagine, the opinions on density and housing were quite varied in the engagement. So when we strove to reflect the feedback in the document, as well as best planning practices, when looking at density and housing forms, it's addressed in several ways. The first is locating the density centrally, like new downtown is the densest area, as well as opportunities in neighborhood centers and corridors, as well as there are community design policies that help mitigate transitions, buffers, and other relationships between different scales of housing. So those are the two primary ways that issue is reconciled in the document.
Okay. Then if I could, there are a couple of other thoughts. Again, there was a reference under community design that says participants desire to have a multicultural community design. I'm not sure that I understand what that really means.
Definitely. So it came up in a few ways. With design, there's housing opportunities, multi-generational housing, or flats within apartments that can accommodate aging in place or older children as they grow up to have their own sense of independence. So there is a way that cultural aspects can play into housing options. When it comes to broader design and urban design, public art and other facets could integrate different cultural expressions, festivals and events and the like.
So multicultural could also be multi-generational, is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then so is the whole idea that this would then influence the development of the Cochrane Municipal Development Plan?
What we heard definitely was used to review all the policies in the municipal development plan and integrate and refine feedback as we examined it. So yes, what we heard from the public is reflected in the municipal development plan, which is the Envision Cochrane 2050 plan.
So, and is that really the overall takeaway, is that all of this will roll into that?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that it's layers of different policies? Okay. And then the tagline, Cochrane at home in the hills or foothills or whatever, was it in hills, right? I guess the planner is definitely the way to go in terms of being able to move that forward. Thank you.
Mayor Janeth?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the presentation tonight. I just wanted to comment on the process. I really appreciated how you outlined, and I'd forgotten how long we've been at this, or how long you've been at this, or what we've been at this. So, and just the number of touch points with the public, and I just wanted to comment on, it appears through now 3 what we heard reports that what I'm hearing, I think, aligns very much with what council has been. And I'm not saying we need to hear what the community says, I'm not saying this properly. I'm not saying we're right. It's not that we're off base, I guess. So the vision document, which you referenced, and council's priorities. So I guess my question is, just to understand the process, like next steps. Monday next week is first reading. Then would there be a public hearing? I didn't catch that at the beginning.
Yes, the public hearing will be November 25th.
So November 25th would be a public hearing, so I'm interested to see if we get feedback from the the public at the public hearing that is contrary to what we've heard so far, or contrary to council's vision or our priorities, to really make sure that this important document is set up for success into the future. And then following that would be second reading, and that's when the council questions and the full debate would happen post-public hearing.
Yeah, I believe so, right?
Through the chair, Mayor Chenong, yes, at the second reading of council, that's currently planned for December 9th. That would be when we voted essentially the strongest endorsement from this council. After that point, it goes into a review and circulation of the Calgary Metropolitan Regional Board, at which point there really isn't an opportunity to make amendments to what's circulated to CMRB after that point. So December 9th is a real critical date for endorsement by this council.
Perfect, thank you. One last question, and I'm assuming that it is, but the document that's in our package is exactly what the document will look like if a person from like planning or a resident wanted to access the Envision Cochrane document, this is what it would look like?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Happy with the way it looks, but I'll reserve my comments till second reading. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Councillor Flowers?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really like Cochrane at Home in the Hills. It's warm and fuzzy and it makes you think about all the nice things in Cochrane. The affordability of housing stresses me out because people don't want Cochrane to grow so quickly, but then if there's more demand for the housing, the housing's going to skyrocket. So how do you balance those things out? It's tricky.
Oh, it's very tricky, and it is something that almost every community in Canada is struggling with as well. And the main tactics to do so are offering those opportunities for densification in those strategic locations, offering housing choice and removing barriers to housing provision as much as possible within the municipality. And there's also opportunities for support and partnerships with nonprofit housing providers and providing opportunities to work with them to increase the housing supply, particularly for those lower levels of affordability.
Right. And did you hear much about communication and people not knowing what's going on or not understanding processes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We heard a little bit, and I think what was most interesting, though, was when we were talking to people out in the community was we spent a lot of time educating people about the planning process and the role of the plan and how different pieces fit together. So I think there's a opportunity there and there is a policy in the draft document about enhancing civic literacy and devoting some time to educate about the planning process as well. What we did hear very strongly from the public was the value of engagement and how they appreciate being involved with decisions and understanding where their feedback was or wasn't incorporated and why. That was definitely a thread.
Yeah, the communication is an ongoing challenge. I saw somebody at the pool the other day talking about water and, we're going to run out of water. Why is this town growing so fast? And we've got water for 100,000 people. We're not going to run out of water, but how do you get that message out there?
Yeah, and it's a very fractured landscape right now where people get their information. So communications has to be so multi-pronged because it isn't like 15 years ago where most people could get it from the paper or the radio. It's super divided now.
There's lots of misinformation.
Yeah.
My other question about housing, somebody said to do it thoughtfully, the housing higher density. What were their ideas about how would we be thoughtful about that?
So they mainly, again, fell in terms of location, concentrating it near amenities, like neighborhood centers and the downtown, but also in terms of the design of it, integrating it with the look and feel of the community and having it reflect the character of Cochrane.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for all the info.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid?
Just one more thought if I could, picking up on Councillor Flowers was talking about it. In the end, I think that, this is a really good news story. I think it was a strategic investment on behalf of council and administration to be able to move forward. And I think that Envision Cochrane 2050 really is a good news story. And I think it's one that I hope that we do well in terms of communicating, because I think to Susan's point, it's really critical to the success of our community and the work that's been done to tell that story the way it needs to be told. So I hope that, in addition to all the hard work that you've done behind this, as the mayor referenced to, in terms of public engagement and a good process is an important part of bringing this all together. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I guess I'll weigh in. All I wanted to add, because we've discussed this a number of times, is that I also really appreciate the slogan that was brought forward by a anonymous member of the community, At Home in the Hills. And as we've discussed privately in passing, is that it's great that it came from a community resident, but also it's kind of handy and, it's very symbolic of the community because we don't even know who it's from. It's just somebody in the community. So it really is the community's own slogan, and I hope our organization in the years to come really embraces that slogan because I think it captures so much about what's great about Cochrane. And with that, I see no other comments. All right, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
And next up on our agenda is 5B, social trends update with Kim Krosick.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Mayor, members of Council. As requested, I'm here this evening to provide an update on the social issues and trends that we're seeing through the FCSS and FRN department. Prior to moving into the social needs, I wanted to provide a quick overview on how we identify the needs in our community. We determine social issues through a number of different ways. First, both FCSS and the FRN conduct extensive data collection. Our department is heavily dependent on grant funding. We receive over $500,000 from the province to support FCSS programming, $425,000 from Children's Services to support the FRN, almost $200,000 from Rocky View County to provide services to our West Rocky View County residents, $75,000 from Alberta Health Services, and we receive approximately $100,000 from a variety of other donors as well. Each of these funding sources require reporting on specific data sets. So we literally have become experts in both data collection and reporting to ensure that we're meeting the funding requirements by all of these funders. Secondly, we monitor trends in program access and we conduct comparison analysis year after year with program development and goal setting. This helps to ensure that we're putting our staffing resources in the areas that they're needed the most. And finally, it's important to note that we work very closely with the social serving agencies in our community. Through different collaborative tables, we regularly discuss the social needs and trends that we're seeing. The issues that I'm going to be discussing tonight are not being only seen by our department and the other local social agencies, but have also been identified as needs across the province by our FCSS colleagues. The top social issues that have been identified include financial insecurity, mental health and social isolation, family relationships and conflict, and support services for seniors. Financial insecurity encompasses challenges to meet one's basic needs and includes things like food insecurity, housing insecurity, difficulties with managing household expenses, and struggles with the ability to participate meaningfully in the community. Mental health and social isolation encompasses all things mental health, ranging from mental health challenges, stress, and anxiety, to experiencing a disconnection from the community and one's natural support systems. Family relationships and conflict includes relationship stress, unhealthy relationship patterns, separation, divorce, and family violence. And support for seniors encompasses the unique challenges that our older adults are experiencing with all of the above, as well as struggling to age in place and being disproportionately targeted with frauds and scams. While these four themes have remained relatively consistent as our population grows, we've seen an increase in both the number of residents accessing services, as well as the complexity of the issues that they're presenting with. Tonight, I wanted to not only present the issues that we're seeing, but to spend a little bit of time highlighting some of the successful responses that we put into place to address some of these issues. Most of our programs and services are preventative, which means that when a need is identified, we work to put strategies in place to address that need. Our goal is to proactively address and mitigate challenges for residents before they escalate into more intricate and resource-intensive issues. This proactive approach helps to ensure the well-being of our residents and helps to foster a more resilient community. It's also important to note that we do not do this work alone. Strong partnerships are essential to the work that we do, and most of the programs that we offer involve collaborative partnerships with social agencies. We have a variety of programs designed to support residents experiencing financial insecurity. We've established a dedicated poverty reduction position within FCSS that works closely with partners to implement programs and services to support our residents. In your council package, many of the programs that are listed show the number of individuals who have accessed services over the past 5 years. I'm not going to go into the programs, I just wanted to highlight a couple that are having a significant impact within our community. The Cochrane Connect card is one of the programs that I'm most proud of. The Connect card helps to ensure that lower income residents have equitable access to recreation, transit, health and personal services, as well as everyday shopping. The amazing thing about this program is that it's had a significant impact on improving the financial well-being of residents without having a significant impact on our budget. FCSS and FRN, we provide the screening, we issue the cards, and reassess eligibility every year. The discounts that are provided are offered generously by each of the businesses and organizations that have become partners. And in the past 5 years, we've grown this program from 2 partners to 31 partners that recognize this card. I also wanted to plug our annual Jacket Racket. We just held this on Saturday. The Jacket Racket is an incredible event that accepts donations of gently used winter wear to ensure that everyone in our community has the clothing they need to stay warm. Our numbers have grown steadily with this program, with 153 people accessing in 2020 to 554 people accessing in 2024. I'm also really excited that we're launching a number of new poverty reduction initiatives as well. This year, we're working with community partners on a program called Grad Glow Up, which will help ensure that finances are not a barrier for graduates to participate in their grad ceremonies. We're also in the works of developing a smart savings guide that'll have tips and tricks to save money in our community. In terms of mental health, we offer a variety of programs to support mental well-being. Our resource worker team provides a continuum of support ranging from information referral, case management, system navigation, and advocacy. The number of residents reaching out for support has increased by 94% between 2020 to 2023. We're focused on prevention by offering programs and events that strengthen community connection and resilience. We have a dedicated community development position focused on mental health, which provides workshops, training, and information sessions, such as a Community Helpers program, which focuses on training for natural helpers in the community that interact with youth, with the goal of reducing youth suicide. We also work collaboratively with multiple community partners to develop a mental health website that offers local resources, strategies for well-being, and stories featuring local residents who have overcome challenges. The website was launched in May 2023 during Mental Health Week. The FRN plays a key role in supporting families. Our team of family support workers offers a variety of programs to support healthy relationships, strengthen natural support system, and build parenting knowledge and resiliency. We also work very closely with Big Hill Haven to ensure families have the support that they require if they're experiencing family violence. The number of families accessing these programs has grown incredibly over the past 5 years. I think a large part of this is attributed to the fact that the FRN opened our doors in October of 2020, and the awareness is finally peaking. We also have a lot of different services available for our seniors. We have a dedicated community development position that's focused on supporting and developing programs and services specifically for older adults. One of the newer programs that I'd like to highlight is our Senior Benefit Support Program. We have a dedicated staff member that will meet with older adults to discuss the various government benefits that are available and assist them with completing and submitting their application. This program helps to ensure that seniors are accessing all of the different government benefits and supports that are available to them. The age-friendly strategy is also another very important piece to address some of the unique challenges that are facing our senior population. We're currently finalizing the action plan and are excited that we'll be ready to share it early 2025. So while you would have seen in your council package and through some of the stats that I shared tonight, there's been some significant growth in the number of residents that are accessing social support services, but I wanted to talk about some of the factors that may be contributing to that as well. First, community growth. The data that was included in both the package and that I shared includes residents from both Cochrane and the West Rocky View County, and both areas have increased in population dramatically over the past 5 years. This increasing population is having a direct impact on the number of individuals and families requiring support. Increased awareness is another factor. FCSS completed a communication survey late 2022 to help us gain an understanding of how residents learn about the different social programs that are available. We use the data from the survey to increase our communication strategies and also target our efforts to increase awareness. And we were incredibly successful with doing this, and you will see that there is a significant jump between 22 and 23, which helps illustrate how our, I guess, more targeted communication was very successful. Data tracking as well. We continue to make improvements in our efficiency and processes within our area. So over the past few years, I've been very focused on improving our data tracking methods. And of course, as we create improvements in our processes and methodologies, we see a shift in data as well. And finally, all of these factors combined with the provincial and national trends of rising costs of living has increased the number of residents reaching out for support. Prior to ending my presentation, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to our team. We have an incredible, passionate team that works tirelessly to meet the social needs of the community. And also a shout out to our partners, because there's so many different partners that we work with, and we couldn't do this work alone without them. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thanks a lot for the presentation. Council? Councillor Reid?
Thank you. Thanks, Kim. That was a great presentation. One of the things that I think is remarkable about you and your team and organization is, it's incredible that you perceive the needs of the community, and unlike a lot of organizations that I've been associated with, you can adopt really quickly. And you do an incredible job, you and your team, in being able to service the needs of our community, and I'm grateful for that. The other thing I think is amazing that most people don't necessarily appreciate, aside from the nimbleness of your organization, is just what you can accomplish with the dollars that you work with, right? I think it's just amazing what it is that you're able to accomplish. And so I wanted to recognize that publicly. And the last thing I wanted to say was, congratulations on an excellent annual report. You didn't reference it, but I know there was a copy in our package and one on our desk. And as someone who kind of follows that world of annual reports for the nonprofit world, I can tell you that is an excellent report. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Flowers?
Yes, well done. It's a great report. The Connect card has really picked up. Your numbers are amazing. It's really good to know that many people, although they may be struggling financially, they're still getting to use all the services that we have. The numbers are amazing. And the food hampers that you're referring to, the food hamper program has really grown. When I look back in 1995, when I started, I think we did one every 2 weeks. And now it's about 165 a month.
Yeah, we're, through the chair to Councillor Flowers, that program has grown tremendously with the number of people that are accessing. And it's also really helpful. There's a lot of different food resources available in the community as well, with Helping Hands food sheds. So that's really helping to offset the food insecurity as well.
Yeah, I attended your interagency meeting last winter, and it was amazing the number of services that have popped up and how well everyone's working together. Congratulations. Jacket Racket, it sounds like went really well, just in time for the weather to change. And the seniors rebate is really popular, so a lot of seniors are moving here, so it's good to know that they're finding you and getting the help that they need. My only question was about the men's shed committee. Have they made any progress?
Through the chair to Councillor Flowers, we actually have made some significant progress with the men's shed. So for those of you that aren't aware, the men's shed is an international initiative that brings senior adults together to do things. So they usually are doing something with power tools or different things. And the whole premise behind it is men like to work side by side. And by bringing men together, it gives them a safe place that they can share their thoughts and ideas and get the support that they need. This started as an idea from a few men in our community. We now have 12 active members on the committee, and they're working towards becoming their own nonprofit organization right now. So.
Are they still looking for space to create it?
There are a few ideas in the works, yeah, right now.
Good. We just opened one in Abrio Place over at Airdrie, so might want to go on a tour of it. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to. That was my only question. So anyways, keep up the great work and don't burn out.
Thank you.
Mayor Janung?
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna sound like a parrot here, but I'm gonna echo what my colleagues have said and just take this opportunity to thank you. Having gone through the report that's in our package, but also on our desks tonight, just want to say, in addition to what Councillor Reid is saying about an excellent report, but I think I need to take a moment to give you kudos for sharing data, but also at the same time including your staff in the report. It was subtle, but meaningful that we get to put faces to the work that's happening. So thank you for all of the work that you're doing. And I have the benefit of interacting with many of your staff on a event kind of basis. And I get to appreciate the great work that they do, but I think that you've reflected that well in this report too. And so I think that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I see no other comments, and similar to all my colleagues, thank you very much for all the hard work coming from your organization, and yeah, echo all their words as well. Anything else, guys? All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
And next up is 5C. We're going to be introducing our draft 2025 budget. And just a note for anybody who's in the audience watching, council has not seen this yet, and there's not going to be a big discussion about the budget. We're just introducing it as the draft to put the discussion out there. Take it away, Mr. Alvin Alim.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor Nagel and Council. I apologize for my voice. I'll try to speak as clearly as possible tonight. So let me begin by starting this presentation by acknowledging the town of Cochrane receiving the Distinguished Budget Award from GFO International for the 2024 budget. I would like to let Council know that we will be pursuing this award again for our 2025 budget as well. So before we get into the budget presentation, administration would like to give Council an update on the fiscal framework. If you recall, the fiscal framework are policies that influence how planned and unplanned spending is budgeted, approved, monitored, and reported. At the Council Strategic Planning we had this past spring, 5 pillars were identified: revenue, asset management, financial sustainability, financial reporting, and business analysis. Within the pillars are subsets, and administration has identified 4 that are high priority to be completed and brought to Council for review and approval before the next budget cycle. And they are investments, tentatively being brought to Council on April 2025, offset levies, June of 2025, debt and reserves, May of 2025. So quickly, let's talk a little bit about budget fundamentals. Why produce a budget? Well, it's a requirement under the MGA sections 248.1 and sections 283.1. Not only does Council have to approve an annual operating and a capital budget, the package must contain a 3-year financial plan as well as a 5-year capital budget as well. So what does the budget do for council? Well, it allows council to make decisions regarding the level of services that can be provided to residents and businesses. 2, guides council in making decisions to fund core services, replace or repair infrastructure. And 3, address community expectations for newer, evolving, and additional services and facilities. When preparing the budget, we need to ensure that it is aligned with council's strategic priorities. And there are 4 pillars: the organizational resiliency, financial and environmental stewardship, built environment, and intentional relationships. Additionally, in preparing the budget principles also help to achieve council's strategic priorities. And for a 2025 budget, there are 3 of them. The first one is implementing a fiscal framework. And key objectives of this priority are to develop and implement a modern investment and debt management policy, a reserve fund management strategy as well. Number 2 is building civic literacy. The key objectives for this priority are fiscal reporting, increased public interface and objectives, and key results reporting metrics. And the third one is closing the infrastructure gap. The key objectives of this priority are revenue diversification and outside levies review and update, asset management program development, and a functional 10-year capital plan program. This past spring, the town completed a budget survey from April 4th to May 8th, where 407 adult Cochrane residents responded. And top priorities identified were long-term sustainability, planning for future growth, and find ways to lower future property taxes. This particular graph shows respondents wanted increases in spending in the following areas: family and community support services at 28%, parks and open spaces at 23%, and roads at 22%. The graph also shows that respondents wanted a decrease in spending in transit at 39%, partner organizations at 35%, and municipal enforcement at 34%. So the overall tax preference. So respondents were shown 4 different tax strategies and asked for their preference. 2023 is provided to council for comparison. But in total, 44% of our respondents prefer cutting services to maintain or reduce taxes, while 46% prefer an increase to taxes to maintain or increase services. 9% did not provide an opinion or did not respond. So let's get into the budget. So the budget considerations, these were presented to council in July and approved. So these are the considerations that were used to put together the 2025 budget. Inflation factor, 2.5%. Assessment growth projected at 3.64%. Just for a little bit of information, if you add the 2.5 and the 3.64, you get 6.14%. Keep that number in mind. Energy costs based upon wholesale energy cost agreements, LGFF, which is the local government fiscal framework, and CCBF, which is the Canada Community Building Fund. Those grant allocations assumed at the 2024 level. Police support grant allocations remain at the 2024 level. And of course, we're maintaining 2024 service levels. So administration's proposed revenue requirement for 2025 is $2.3 million, or 6.14%, increase from 2024. So just a little bit of information for council. The starting point that the administration started off with was 23.61%. Compared to 2024, our starting point was 26.17%. So there was a better starting point for 2025. So administration was able to reduce expenses in various areas, which resulted in the 6.14% tax requirement. Transfer from the tax stabilization reserve is $109,500. The expected balance after the transfer is $704,000. and reserve contributions held at prior year levels. The budget also contains 16 additional FTE resource allocations for the following areas. Strategic services, 2 FTE, customer and administrative services, 1, financial services, 1, human resources, 1, parks and open spaces, 5.6, family and community support services, 1, planning, 1, safety codes, 1, operations, 1, and water and wastewater, 1.4. So this graph, I just wanted to show council awareness of our reserve balances. So at the end of 2023, our reserve balance is made up of capital and operating. The capital was $40.3 million, and the operating is 16.8. So over the next 3 years, our capital reserves will decrease by $19.3 million to $20.9 million, and our operating reserves will decrease by $7.3 million from 16.8 to 9.5. And what I just wanted to give council awareness is this graph demonstrates the importance to have a reserve policy and strategy in place before the next budget cycle. So we'll shift into the rate-supported budget. Utilities. The water, wastewater, and storm sewer, those fees have increased for 2025, and there are 5 main reasons for increasing these rates. First one is the increased City of Calgary wastewater treatment rates. The cost to treat wastewater that's billed to the town is $244,600 additional for 2025. That's an increase of 6%. Inflationary increases. These include higher costs for power, natural gas, gasoline, water meters, and material and treatment supplies. Enhanced water conservation rebates. This is additional funding to support increased community rebate participation and enhanced water conservation rebates. Preparing for infrastructure renewal through reserve contributions. Increased capital reserve contributions are required to address the shortfall between current reserve balances and the funding required to replace our end-of-life major utility infrastructure. And lastly, investing in our critical infrastructure. This is the funding that's required for the increased maintenance and repair costs for critical infrastructure such as water meters, underground repairs, resulting from the wastewater CCTV infrastructure analysis, as well as valve replacements and pump and motor repairs. Even though the rates are increasing for 2025 for Cochrane still continues to have a competitive utility rate compared to regional partners. So this is just a table that shows the rate increase from 2024. So the water fixed charge will increase by $1.66 per month. Water consumption charge, 27 cents. Wastewater fixed charge of $2.65. Wastewater consumption charge, 94 cents, and the storm sewer fee, 68 cents, for a monthly total of $6.21, or $7.46 for the year. Now this is the total bill impact. So once you add in the average the municipal taxes for this particular property, which is assessed at $615,500, the total annual increase is $233.13, or $19.43 per month. For comparison, the annual increase from 2023 to 2024 was $223. That's a difference of $10 from 2024. Capital budget. In preparing the capital budget, 3 priorities were considered: planning for future growth, maintaining our infrastructure, and community improvements. This is a table that shows the 5-year capital budget highlights. Main focus, again, will be the 2025 budget. So the rate supported, we're looking at doing $51.1 million in capital projects. The rate supported, $30.3 million for total capital budget for 2025 of $81.4 million. Now, if you take the total spending for the 5 years, the total rate supported capital for the next 5 years is $154.9 million. And the total tax supported capital for the next 5 years is $48.4 million. Grand total for the next 5 years is $203.3 million in assets. So how are we going to fund the $81.4 million for 2025? Well, 45% will be funded through debt, 23% from reserves, 7% from grant, 8% from Massa levy, and 15% from water connection fee, and 2% from other. The other is operations or a draw from the unrestricted accumulated surplus and other grants. I mean by other grants, either grants that we would be looking at to fund these projects and not from LGFF or CCBF. So these are the key capital projects that we just wanted to focus on for the 5-year capital projects. Some of them are single year, for example, the water supply for the Girl Guides and the license acquisition, as well as the purchase of the 2025 aerial fire truck. But there are other projects that are multi-year, and I have a number of examples. The Horse Creek Sports Park, it's $20.6 million. The main pressure zone reservoir, that's $19.7 million. The wastewater pipeline twinning, $55.8 million. The Bow River Pathway, $3.2 million. And the Griffin Industrial Water Main Loop of $4 million. With respect to public information, administration's draft 2025 budget will be available online tonight or tomorrow at the latest. Town will be hosting public forums. One will be on Friday, October 25th at the SLS from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., as well on Saturday, October 26th at SLS from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Our residents can also provide feedback on Let's Talk Cochrane.ca. The budget deliberation dates are November 12th, 13th, 19th, and the 21st if needed. So the additional information that administration will be bringing during deliberations will be a tax rate comparator, a utility rate comparator, the municipal price index and residential taxes per capita, as well as a growth comparison and other service level considerations, if any. Thank you.
All right, excellent. And again, before we move into questions, just remind everybody that we have several days booked to deliberate the budget in detail. And so if we could just keep our comments to high level clarification comments tonight, it would be good. Councillor McFadden.
Well, good evening. I think I'm joining you in having a sketchy voice tonight. So, but I wanted to first congratulations on winning the Distinguished Budget Award. I really appreciate that. It was something I championed, and I'm really glad the municipality was able to move ahead. And you said you could do that, so I was glad you did. So thank you for that. I really appreciate the layout of the budget this year, and look forward to more information deliberations. The one question I do have right off the top, just for clarification, is it was identified that reserve contributions are held at previous year's levels. Does that mean there's no new contributions to the reserves, or we're just contributing the same amount as we did last year?
Deputy Mayor, to Councilor McFadden, for the tax supported, the majority are remained at the 2024 level. The ones for the rate supported, those have increased.
So for the reserve contribution, I think maybe my question was coming from the capital level. For the
Yes,
capital
those are capital contributions. Those are all the capital reserves.
All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you so much for your work to date, and I look forward to the budget deliberations. I wanted to say I appreciated the fact that the 2025 draft budget is being presented in a way that it clearly establishes that this is administration's budget and not council's, that it's a working document for council to work with. And I also appreciate the goal of greater understanding and transparency. I think that'd be great. I also appreciated the reference of moving action items to strategic objectives. I think that will go a long way to creating greater improvement in clarity, alignment, and accountability, as well as enhancing our strategic goals. I think that's great. I had a couple of questions. One is I was trying to understand what it is that administration is proposing as the property tax rate. Is it 3.64? Is that what I'm supposed to take away from this?
Councillor Mayor, Deputy Mayor Nagel to Councillor Reid, the total is 6.14%. And what I did is I just broke down the two components of that 6.14. It's made up of 2.5% inflation as well as the 3.64 for growth.
Okay, so that includes the projected increase in terms of water sewage rates.
That is the rate supported, so that's totally that's totally separate.
Okay, so what is being proposed and rolled up?
What is being proposed is the revenue requirement of $2.3 million, which is equivalent to 6.14% tax increase.
If I may, I think just Councillor Reid, what you're asking is what's the kind of direct cost to the taxpayer as proposed in this budget?
On the
is
average.
the 2.5% inflationary factor
Right.
is what would be generated from the tax base.
Okay. And has Colt, the request for, as per our previous meeting, has the Colt request been taken into consideration with these numbers?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Our previous meeting, we had a request from Colt for an increase, and I'm just wondering if those Colt numbers are included in this rolled up number.
I believe Ms. Lowe has a response.
I can confirm through the chair to Councillor Reid, the numbers that are included in the budget for Colt are the full 64 hours of service. So based on that presentation that Michelle gave last time, that is what's included in this current budget.
Okay, great. And then if I could, just one more question, maybe two. One is the 3-year projected debt. I think when I rolled it all up, it's about $86 million, which seems kind of staggering, at least in my mind. So during our budget deliberations, I'm wondering if administration could provide council with some context to that number. Again, not looking for an answer tonight, but just in preparation, that'd be one of the questions I would ask. And then likewise, I'd like to have a further discussion during those budget deliberations to Councillor McFadden's point about reserves. I think that needs a little bit more in-depth discussion, and look forward to that in our budget deliberations. So again, thank you for your work to this point.
Deputy Mayor Nagel to Councillor Reid, the answer is yes to both. We will be going in depth in for those two areas.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Elvin. I had a couple things on my mind after listening to it. We just listened to the Envision Cochrane 2050 presentation, and a couple of the sound bites or quotes I took from it were implementing infrastructure advances in advance of growth and ensuring quality infrastructure and services are developed at a pace that matches the town's population growth. And then in your presentation here, I also caught that closing the infrastructure gap was something that was mentioned in the budget analysis there. And that gets me all excited to talk about the strategy to actually pay for those aims. One of my questions, I got excited hearing that we're going to have the offsite levy discussion come to us in June of 2025. Just hoping you could elaborate a little more on what'll be part of that topic. I assume it would be modernizing it, making sure we're collecting possible extra offsite levy places that we haven't before or that have been expanded upon by the province. Just wondering if you could color in what that topic is going to look like in June.
Deputy Mayor to Councillor Wilson, from the finance side, we haven't started our work on the offset levies. Right now, it's with Drew's team, and I'm sure he can.
Yeah, Councillor Wilson, we will bring you a revised and refreshed offsite levy that includes increases in the rates to the offsite levy, opportunities for us to collect for all the projects. Obviously, all the projects, as you're seeing, have significantly more costs associated with them. There are different items that we can include in the offsite levy, so we would be really modernizing it to meet the needs of our community.
Excellent, thank you. The reason I'm bringing that up isn't to jump the gun. I know June's a long time from now, but when we're talking during budget time, it might be good to be keeping in mind what expansions might be available to us in June and what extra revenue could be coming in from that, say, next time we come around to budget. That's just on my mind right now as we talk about things like the, I guess the reserve balances we were just talking about, and the fact that you seem to be dropping precipitously. We need to be not only talking about how we're adding to them, but how we're paying for it. And so the OSL conversation's at the top of my mind. And the only other thing I took from your presentation here, you had the graph there halfway through the presentation about, was there a survey of public engagement, increased number of residents hoping to cut taxes to reduce or maintain services? Did I take that away correctly, where there's a larger proportion this year as opposed to the last time we asked, looking to reduce taxes, cut services? Did I take that from the graph correctly?
Let's go back to that graph. This graph?
One back still, I think. Yeah, that one there, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and for the cut services to main taxes, cut services to reduce taxes or maintain services, in 2023 that was 36%. This year it was 45%. So yes, that one's increased. And the one for increasing taxes to main services or maintain or increase services, that dropped by 4% from 2023.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you including that in the presentation too. It's good to see what the public mood is on all these things, and whether that's driven by the fact that I guess you can't really tell if it's to cut services or just to maintain services, because those are both lumped into the 245s there. Oh, I see. Oh, you do have them broken out. Sorry, I'm having trouble. I'm half colorblind here. Okay. So the 24 cut services, maintain taxes, thank you, that's what I was asking for, is remain the same. It's cut services, cut taxes that has increased, okay.
And if I just may take a moment to add here, I think it's just really important to highlight the impact of the public engagement on the production of the budget. And so administration, obviously, this is not necessarily the only consideration, but this is a strong indicator to us from what the community is feeling in relation to the budget, and was, I think, a big driver in the outcome of the budget we produced for council's consideration, which is having as minimal impact as possible on the taxpayers of our community, but also protecting the services that they rely on. And so that's, I think, if there was a kind of a core takeaway from administration's perspective on the draft budget, was try to thread that needle, which admittedly is a difficult one. But that is certainly where we came out, where it was pretty clear there's a balance of our community on either side of that line. So trying to walk that line in the middle is, I think, pretty evident in the budget that's been produced.
Yep, thank you. I didn't have anything further to say about it, other than to highlight to council as we went by it really quickly. It was interesting to me. And a quick compliment that I appreciate in the, when we're talking about the upcoming budget, when you're talking about percentages, I do like that we've broken out the inflationary portion from it, from the overall increased cost to build or maintain services. So that's, I think that's a meaningful breakdown.
Thank you.
That's all I have for today.
Mayor Janung.
Yeah, I don't have any questions about the presentation tonight. I just want to clarify something Councillor Reid asked about the 6.14%. So if I understand it correctly, overall administration saying you need 2.308 million to operate the operations. But from that funding, 3.64% of it is coming from growth. The rest is inflation, which is 2.5. So the overall, I guess, impact to a average homeowner is the 2.5%. Is that the right way to? I heard it opposite. I heard 6.1. I just want to really be clear on that before we
Thank you, if I may,
get
Mr.
a barrage of feedback from
Mr.
community?
Liam, yes. Absolutely. Obviously, council's well aware of this, and we're cautious to speak about the 2.5% as a direct implication to individual taxpayers. The 2.5% is all existing taxpayers of Cochrane need to account for that 2.5%. Whereas the 3.64, I believe it is, will be added by newcomers to our community.
Yeah, and as Councillor Wilson pointed out, I'm glad that you've separated those two. When we put them together, I just want to be clear that the public understands it's not a 6.14% proposal. Great, thank you.
We're happy to make that clear distinction as well administratively.
Okay, I thought I had it understood, but then your question made me realize I didn't understand what was presented. So it's a 6.1% total increase in tax revenue. This is just a lump sum, and then we can subtract growth from that, which we're projecting at 3.5 is the yes? 3.64. Leaving 2.5% as a total tax increase, but the inflation rate, CPI, is 1.5?
It's 2.5.
2.5. So, but and that 6.1, we were talking in nominal terms. So we're talking about an actual only inflationary proposed increase in the budget. Okay, well, that's the kind of budget that I like to see. And I wish that was the headline, that is inflationary increase, but it's not a 6.1% increase. It's an inflationary increase is all that's on the draft budget. That's the point I was trying to. Yeah, far cry from 6.1%. Okay. Okay, perfect. I'm glad we clarified that. I have no other questions. Does anybody have anything else? Does administration have anything else to add?
Perhaps I would just add, I will spend much time talking about it. I think Kim earlier did a really fantastic job of highlighting all the work that's gone into this. Obviously, the production of the budget is really an organizational effort, but you'll see a few members of the finance team here, along with Mr. Aleem, that do a lot of the heavy lifting to do this work and get it prepared. And administration is really looking forward to spending more time on this budget. I'm pleased and proud of the work that our group has done, and look forward to sharing with council how we think this will put our community in a good position for 2025.
Okay, great. And one last reminder for any of our friends in the media who might be watching, it was an inflationary increase is what has been proposed. All right, before we head to the next item, I'd like to check in after being in here for an hour. Does anybody need a break? Okay, we'll take a quick 5-minute break and then come right back. Thank you. We're back on camera? Okay, let's resume the meeting. Back over to Mr. Krasinski for Cochrane Growth Study.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and members of council. Thank you for having us here for the Cochrane Growth Study. I'm joined by Chris Nelson, our lead consultant from Urban Systems, who prepared the Cochrane Growth Study for us. I'm going to hand it over to Chris, who will provide a quick presentation. I just want to provide some quick kudos to our senior planner, Mark Spence, as well, who prepared the reports for you this evening. So, thank you. Chris?
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, Deputy Mayor, members of council. I'm pleased tonight to share with you the final draft, or the draft of the growth study that we've completed here. So just taking a step back, what were we trying to achieve with the growth study from the very beginning? I think first off, it was to support the council and the community to understand how the community is positioned over the next 25 years to support growth and looking at that overall. It's an opportunity to test growth patterns, and obviously going through the municipal development plan that you heard earlier tonight and the work that's been going into that over the last while, that's a way to be able to shape growth moving forward. And so that's, through the growth study, we're hoping to feed into that as to what different growth patterns might look like. And ultimately, this is to be a foundational document, hopefully, that will support long-range planning, infrastructure master planning, capital planning, and budgetary items moving forward. There's 4 main components within the growth study, and we'll go through each of those in the slide deck here briefly, just given that we've been in front of council a couple of times now. First, on land supply side of things, when we took a first look at this, it was really just looking at what lands are available within the town to potentially support future development. So this is what you're seeing on the figure here, is that first blush of that. Then we really looked at, well, what are some natural constraints, what are some physical constraints, and what are some perhaps uses of the current land that might limit their ability to support future land development. And this comes to the figure at the end here. On the left side, what we're showing here is really the gross developable lands within the town of Cochrane that could support future growth. That doesn't mean that they are going to support future growth, it just means it has that potential to support future growth. But I think it's important to understand that not all lands should be considered equal. On the right side there, we're showing that some lands are a bit trickier to develop as you move forward. So when you're thinking about future growth in a long-range perspective, in this case 25 years, you might want to take a more conservative approach to what lands actually might be able to show up and support growth. And so on the right side again, the lands that are most likely to accommodate growth, that are less tricky perhaps, that have less constraints from a servicing or land ownership perspective, even topography perspective for some of those lands that need to be looked at a bit further. You might want to lean more towards 600 hectares opposed to 757 hectares. When we look on the other side of the equation, the sense of what land demands will be in the future, we looked at 4 different scenarios, a low, a medium, a high, and a very high. And these all looked at the proportionate growth of Cochrane within the region, and then looked at different scenarios of that percentage of growth within the region. The very highest presented here is a reflection point, more than anything. We don't anticipate this would be the growth that you're going to see over the next 25 years. That type of growth is likely unsustainable, and as you grow to be bigger as a community, your proportionate amount would typically decrease. The percentage of growth you see would typically decrease. But what that is for is just to say over the next, say, 5 years, if you were to see that kind of growth, what's the impacts of that, and being able to test that in a shorter term lens. But through the work that we did, looking at historical trends within Cochrane and looking at the trend line to proportionally how much Cochrane is growing within the region, the high growth rate was one that we leaned on the most to be able to do the testing throughout the growth study. When we looked at both residential and employment land demand over the next 25 years, the total land demand that's anticipated is 1,150 plus or minus hectares. We then considered what lands were available currently within the town that were subdivided but weren't occupied, and took that into consideration to get to what we see as being, under the high growth scenario, to see that be the future land demand over the next 25 years, which is about 1,063 hectares. So when you take these two pieces together, what land's available for development, and again, that's a range because you have upwards of 500 or 757 hectares, but some of those lands might not be able to come online in the next 25 years and or maybe never, depending on the limitations of those lands and or how you future plan those lands. And then you look at the demand of future land, there's a deficit there. And that's in the order of magnitude on the more conservative side, about 500 hectares over the next 25 years. Based on that, I think a key question is when would you potentially run out of land? And, looking at the high growth scenario, which if you average that out, again, that changes annually depending on the year of growth, but it's about 46 hectares a year. The town would be anticipated to run out in the next 13 to 17 years of land. Again, depending on how much land is available for development, and that there's a range there, like I mentioned earlier. The third piece that we looked at in the growth study was the suitability of land, and this is really focused on lands that are don't have local level policy planning in place, or there's future planning that's needed for those lands, or there's anticipated amendments to those plans. And so that's the lands that you're seeing that are in color here on the screen. And we looked at the suitability of these lands through 4 different lenses: environmental, land ownership, employment, and offsite infrastructure. And this is really not intended just to give a clear answer, but more as applications come forward, as you do work on the MDP, as you do work in local level planning policy, for lenses for council administration to consider, and to see if those lands are suitable for those types of uses that you need in the future for the community. I think something to call out here on the employment side is, there's not many lands remaining that don't have planning policy in place that are really highly suitable for employment lands, at least not at any great extent. And so that's something obviously the town will need to grapple with in the future. That's how you support those future land demands within your community. And then obviously on the far right side, something I think that was coming up in the previous presentations in regards to offsite infrastructure and the improvements to bring these lands on is critically important to the town. And something that we wanted to highlight within the growth study was not only the infrastructure that's needed, but who's typically responsible to bring these big offsite infrastructure items forward. And that's not to say those things can't change, but more to provide a lens to council about where that perhaps that financial risk might lie or obligation in the future. And the last piece within the growth study was different pathways of growth. Obviously, and we presented this before, the starting point when you're thinking about growth and what type of growth you want to accommodate in the future really should start at the strategic level, your strategic plan, your community vision, municipal development plan that's underway right now. And that might lean on, financial sustainability, type of character of growth you want to see, connectivity, accessibility, et cetera. And the work that we did within the growth study was more focused on the impacts of that, the numbers per se, but obviously starting at strategic level is an important first step. So as growth comes forward, as that demand is showing up within your community, there's a couple of ways to accommodate that. You can accommodate that through established area development, so intensification of existing areas, or through the development of new areas. And so we've shown this visually on the figure. It's not by any means a limitation to those areas where it could be intensified, but just a starting point for the conversation. We looked at 3 different scenarios. Pathway 1 was the status quo. So if you're to see the same level of intensification you're seeing every year within your established areas, and you were to see the densities that you're seeing currently in your new communities, what would that look like over the next 25 years? Pathway 2 looked at intensification of the downtown area. Again, arbitrary boundary here just to visually show what that could look like perhaps. But the intensification of that, and we were targeting 10% of all new growth showing up in that area over the next 25 years. And the third pathway was looking at the intensification of established areas, so again, 10% of all new growth, and then also an intensification, higher densities being seen in new growth areas across the community. From the work that's been done on the municipal development plan to date, I would suggest that you're probably in between pathway 2 and 3, where that's leaning towards intensification of the core area over time, as well as some specific nodes and corridors in your new areas, but not increased density everywhere in the community. As we work through these pathways of growth, I think a couple things to call out, regardless of the pathways. And again, we're trying to work within realistic intensifications and densities. Regardless of the pathway that you go down, there's going to be a deficit, and that's the numbers you're seeing on the bottom. A deficit of land to accommodate future growth if you're to hit that high growth scenario over the next 25 years. I guess the second piece to call out is that you can see that there's a pretty big range there, starting from the status quo to say pathway 3 of how much land is actually needed over the next 25 years. And that's something obviously to consider as you're thinking about strategically how the town wants to grow over the next 25 years. So I guess in closing, there's a few recommendations out of the growth study that are highlighted. Number 1, in guiding future policy development. This is really about how you want to grow, and this is establishing that through the municipal development plan and being very clear on what the expectations are for growth and that pattern of growth that you want to see within your community. So that's obviously underway, which is really positive. The second recommendation is setting the stage for desired outcomes, and this is really focused on local level policy planning. So that's a downtown redevelopment plan or other neighborhoods that you want to see perhaps to accommodate some growth in the future. Setting the stage for that redevelopment as to where that could happen and to what intensity that could happen in. Just so that's very clear to those that are obviously in those communities, but also those looking to invest in and grow in those communities. Establish plan and service land targets. This is really just making sure you're setting yourself up for success in the future. So a community like the City of Calgary, for example, has targets that they have for how much planned land, how much land has local level policy planning in place to accommodate future growth. They have targets for that. It's 15 years for the City of Calgary. And then they have service land targets, so how much land actually has servicing ready to go to connect to the overall network. So you're just making sure that you're ready to accommodate growth as it shows up and you're not having these big hiccups along the way. And the last one is rethinking the town's boundary, obviously through the work that we did that shows over the next 25 years, based on the high growth scenario that there's going to be a deficit of land available to accommodate future growth. And so thinking about how you can accommodate that potentially if the town chooses to go beyond your boundary is obviously an important step. So with that concludes the slide deck, but happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks for your presentation. Councillor Reid.
Chris, thank you. I found the report in your presentation just fascinating, exciting, and incredibly valuable for us, and I think those of us who will follow in our shoes. You know, considering the implications of the future, you know, a community of 86,000 people by 2027 or by 2047, 13,000 more jobs and 24,000 more houses is just as exciting. I have two questions, I mean, and a comment. A comment is that I think the growth study really complements the presentation we heard earlier of the Envision Cochrane 2050. I think it really sets this council and the future council's administration up for success. I think these are really important documents that what I love, kind of, they're not the next 4 years, they're looking long range, and I think that's something I think is really important for our community. I guess the questions I have are, will the results of this study be acceptable to provincial government for any future funding or grant requests that we might have?
Through the chair, to Councillor Reid, I mean, this information is so valuable just to be able to communicate that to the province, especially expressing the speed of growth that you're experiencing and the demands and pressures you're experiencing on infrastructure and otherwise. Right. So for sure, it's valuable, you know, at all levels, I would say, even beyond grant funding, just to be able to paint that picture for those that aren't, you know, as knowledgeable about your community and making those decisions at a higher level, for sure.
And if I may just, sorry, through the chair, sorry, Councillor Reid, if I may just add to that as well. I'll just use one example, is the province has recently announced grant program specifically to support fast-growing communities. And so this is the kind of information that we can use to supplement and demonstrate the pressures and the needs in our community. And so, while it wasn't, I think, specifically generated for those purposes, I can see this having broad applications, including communicating to other orders of government what our community is expected to experience over, you know, the coming years.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's been a wise investment on this council and administration in terms of being able to go forward with this type of study for multiple reasons. The two other questions I had was, you referenced the town boundary, but what I didn't find in the document was we've talked, I think, at least privately as council, about the concern about identifying our boundaries and the potential rural sprawl, if you will, that would border onto us. And I'm not sure how or when we should have that discussion, but I mean, it should be part of this package in terms of being able to say, what are our boundaries, right? And I mean, not just that we're going to grow or we need to annex land, but for what reasons? And then to identify a buffer of some sort around that, I think it should be an important part of that. And then the last question I had, or maybe that was a statement, but the last question I had was, are there certain types of land that we'll need sooner than later? Does that report identify that? I know it talks about the need for land, but I get the sense that there are going to be some needs of certain types of land much sooner than in the near future, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Through the chair to Councilor Reid, the study didn't go into that depth in the sense of when you would see certain land uses perhaps see that demand. It definitely does call out under current planning, lands that have current plans in place that can move forward to development and or actively being developed, where some of those gaps are and where you're going to see perhaps some of those pressures. It didn't go into a time horizon though as when you'd see that show up. But definitely, I think something to think about as perhaps a next step related to that in relation to active development going on.
Like, Chris, are we short right now, light industrial land use or amounts of land for that?
Yeah, so the way that the growth study looked at it was employment lands overall. And over the next 25 years, it's anticipated you're going to need about 166 hectares of employment lands. Currently, and this is a bit because we had to do a kind of a timestamp as to when we did the analysis, but currently moving forward, the town has about 50 hectares of non-residential lands that are planned currently. So you have a pretty significant deficit for those future employment areas over the next 25 plus years. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was a great presentation.
Mayor Janung.
Yeah, thank you. I want to start my comments first by thanking you. Great report, great study. But this is not a target. And I think I've actually heard from people, maybe not in Cochrane, but provincially asking, what's Cochrane's growth target? And we don't have a growth target. We actually don't need to ask anyone to move here. They're already moving here. And that's a good problem to have, mind you. I just wanted to say I really appreciated the next steps that you've outlined, and I'm not going to go through them, but I think just as I reference the growth discussion that's happening in our community, there are many asking for us to stop growth, to slow down growth, to manage growth. We heard that in the Envision 2050 report, what we heard. And for many reasons, we can't stop growth. But this document will help us guide the growth, look ahead to the growth that we can now expect, or with all the scenarios, and I appreciated the better, best, worst kind of cases. But this, when people say get ahead of growth, this is how we get ahead of growth. By studying it, by preparing ourselves so we are better situated to be able to handle what we can expect in the future. So really appreciate having been armed with this, and I just wanted to say for my colleagues administratively and council-wise, I mean, these are the 4 things that we need to focus on. And I appreciate having them crystal clear. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that is it for our regular agenda. Next up, we have a closed session. If I could get a motion from council to go into camera. Yeah. Mayor Janung.
Go into closed session, please.
All right, all in favor? Let's do it.